There once was a man called Boris J, who said in our homes we all must stay. The pubs will stay are closed all day. Now nowhere shall we go. Huh! Soon may my tasting come to bring me Pinot or Sauvignon. One day when the lockdown is done, to the vineyards we will go. Is it berry fruits or a hint of spice? Fresh cut grass or some egg fried rice? We've sniffed it once and we've tasted twice. I think it's coat to run. Huh! Soon may my tasting come to bring me Napa and Mornington. One day when the lockdown is done, to the vineyards we will go. Corona's barely New Zealand sin. Jacinda stopped it from coming in. The wines are so good that here's the thing, we just can't wait to go. Huh! Soon may my tasting come to bring me Marlborough and Nelson. One day when the lockdown is done, to New Zealand we shall go.
Alex, what are you doing? This is meant to be a wine tasting.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Never mind. Tonight on the Online Wine Tasting Club, winemaker Chloe sings us a pepeha. Alex shows off his knowledge about birds. He's home to a rare breed of falcon known as the Carrerio. And Trinity Hill Winery demonstrate an unconventional approach to crushing grapes. It's time to go down under with the Discoverer series Wines of New Zealand. Hello and a very, very warm welcome to you, and it's lovely to see you all. And sorry, we put the price is up. This is a bit of an early expose. We did so well with that last tasting that we were doomed to have.
I'll tell you a little secret. As we get into Wines of New Zealand, we were all slick and we were all excited. We were all ready to go.
Yes.
But Mr. Taylor thought a sea shanty with a beard with 20 minutes to go was the way forward. But anyway, that is enough of that. And we are Wines of New Zealand this month. We'll talk a little bit more about it later, but it is New Zealand Wine Week this week. So we thought we'd do a whole month of New Zealand stuff with our Discoverers today and our Adventures level a week on Saturday. But before I start talking more, for those who haven't already done it, it's probably important to get wine number one in the glass.
Absolutely. And just as my way of excusing myself, if you haven't seen those sea shanties going around, I don't know where you've been, but it has relevance to tonight because that song, the original one, The Wellerman, is a New Zealand sea shanty. It's from the people who first went over to New Zealand and were doing the fishing, and they were whaling and doing all sorts of things that probably would frown upon these days. But I thought it was a rather wholesome little thing that we had there. But yes, so the wine tasting sea shanty, we didn't see that one coming, did we, when we started this?
I didn't see it until about 15 minutes ago, but that's a whole different story. But before we get into, so tonight we're doing a little bit of a tour. We're doing a couple of wines from Hawke's Bay, a couple of wines from Marlborough, again down to Central Otago. But what I think is really, really exciting about New Zealand is, it's a relatively small winemaking country. So I'm just going to give you a few little facts about New Zealand that I think are interesting. Even though it only makes 1% of the world's wine, it makes 17% of the world's Sauvignon Blanc, and that's why I think we all know and love it. It's the 15th biggest producer in the world, but surprisingly behind countries such as Russia, China and Romania all make more wine. Volume doesn't
China
always...
I would have seen now, because they're big at everything these days, but Romania,
But does volume always equal quantity, and does volume always show what gets exported? 62% of New Zealand wines are white, which I think, we see a lot of white wines, and 77% of the whites are Sauvignon Blanc again. So we've got Sauvignon Blanc in the glass, so that's it's important. And in 2020, New Zealand produced 3 million hectolitres of wine. That's a fair drop of juice.
That's quite a bit.
That will get me and Alex to about, a week and a half probably here.
Depends how many sea shanties they try to
And
record.
my final fun fact is the most expensive wine in New Zealand, kind of day in, day out, is a wine called Destiny Bay, and that's from the Waiheke Island up in the north, and that sits about £250 a bottle. But before we get into the first video, what I want to say about New Zealand wine is I absolutely love it, and I think it's cutting edge. There's some great stuff, and for me, in the wine industry and seeing how wine has developed and the education of wine has developed, New Zealand has really been almost that pioneer of it. I remember when I got into wine, people would want a dry white or a medium dry, or you know, they might get a name like a Peace Porter or something like that. Then it moved in and they wanted a Chablis or a Sancerre or a Rioja. And I really feel New Zealand was the first place that I really saw take off, that people would come in knowing what they wanted of a country, a style and a region. It was the first place that I really heard that people were talking, oh, have you got a Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough? And I think that's really, really cool that they kind of led that way of going, this is what we are stylistically. And I'm not going to talk too much because Alex talked a little bit about it in the video, that Sauvignon Blanc is one of those grapes that wherever you go, it has a different world. And I truly believe that if you like a Sauvignon Blanc from Sancerre in France, you're more likely to like a Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley in the same region. Whereas if you like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, you may well prefer a New Zealand Gewürztraminer or Chardonnay than a Sauvignon Blanc from somewhere else in the world. And I think that's really, really interesting. But I hope today gives you a little bit of fun. There might be some wines you know, some wines you don't know, but I'm talking too much. So let's drink wine number one and let's go to our first video.
New Zealand. With its islands stretching around 1,000 miles from north to south, it's home to some of the most dramatic landscapes in the world. From gentle rolling hills and stunning coastlines, through to misty valleys, rainforests, all the way up to towering mountains and majestic glaciers. And of course, it's the unmistakable backdrop to the Lord of the Rings series of films. I mean, just look at it, it really is quite something. If you've been following along with our previous tastings, you'll probably have a good idea what I'm about to say. That this variety leads to tiny pockets of land with an incredible range of different climates, which in turn leads to totally different growing conditions, suitable for a huge variety of different plants. So, when it comes to grapes and wine, why do we only ever think of New Zealand and Sauvignon Blanc? In comparison, Italy is around the same size but has more than 500 different grape varieties used regularly to make wine. This being New Zealand Wine Week, we got in touch with New Zealand Wines and we've been working closely with them to go deep into the history of the country and more importantly to find out what's happening today. Now you might think that compared to other countries we've talked about, New Zealand's wine history might be a rather short piece. It's only really since the 1990s that today's common grape varieties like Sauvignon really became popular. However, it was 200 years ago that one of the early missionaries, Samuel Marsden, made a forecast. New Zealand promises to be very favourable to the vine. Accordingly, many of the early colonists brought vine cuttings over, becoming quite a common sight in their gardens. The first written record of grapes being grown was in 1880, and in 1840 a French explorer called Dumont d'Urville wrote down that he had enjoyed a light, delicious, sparkling white wine on arrival. Throughout the 19th century, the industry struggled with the same problems that blighted much of the world: mildew, phylloxera, and religious zealotry. The dreams of the fledgling industry were fading fast. Things recovered slightly in the 1920s and 30s, and the Second World War was actually good for business. With global supplies struggling and high tariffs, the local industry started to boom. The 60s and 70s brought a huge influx of investment from foreign countries who had started to see the potential. To give you an overview of the winemaking regions of New Zealand, I'm going to give you a bit of the tour of the country, but to make it more interesting, I'll be using the set locations from Lord of the Rings. Up in the northernmost parts of the country, there are some small pockets around Northland or Hobbiton making Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. Around Auckland and Waikato, just to the east of Mordor, you'll find Cabernet Sauvignon, Bordeaux blends and some more Chardonnay. Just south of Mordor, Gisborne is where you'll find Chardonnay and Pinot Gris, and then we're on to Hawke's Bay, where in addition to all the varieties grown further north, we'll start to see some Sauvignon Blanc and some Syrah. Wairarapa, on the southernmost tip of the island, that's Rivendell and Helm's Deep, brings Pinot Noir into the mix. We then make the jump across to the South Island, to Marlborough, the modern-day home of Sauvignon Blanc, but also making some interesting Riesling and Pinot Noir. We then move west to Nelson, a small hop but a completely different climate. Dimrill Dale in Lord of the Rings, in fact. Going south, we really start to see Pinot Noir starting to dominate, first in the Waipara Valley near Christchurch, Edoras in Lord of the Rings, then down to the incredible variety of landscapes, rivers and beautiful lakes in Otago. In the films, this area on the South Island was used for more than 6 different locations, including the Golden Plains and the Dead Marshes. I told you it was quite varied. Right, that's quite enough hobbity nonsense, at least we've got that out our system. Let's talk about grapes. Now, many of the fans of the wine scene had come from Central Europe, such as Austria, and they had planted what they knew and loved, and went for reliable, trustworthy grapes that would produce a lot, if not perhaps the best quality. Things like Müller-Thurgau. While popular locally, it was of course the shift to grapes such as Chardonnay and yes, Sauvignon that took the wines all around the world. Suddenly, a lot of the old vineyards had to be replanted, but this would mean that they would need to go 3 years or longer without generating any new income. Unable to cope with that, many of the local growers innovated and did something rather clever. Excuse me for geeking out for a moment, but this is called chip budding, and it's a technique where pretty much all of the old vine is cut away, and a single tiny bud from a Sauvignon Blanc vine is grafted onto it. Now, everything new to grow comes out of that one bud. So despite all of the roots and the trunk being made from the Müller-Thurgau, you end up with Sauvignon shoots, leaves, and of course grapes. The old vine's just reduced to being a pipe that carries up water and nutrients from the soil. The clever thing is that this process only takes your vineyard out of action for 1 year, not 3 or 4. Clever stuff. So Sauvignon, previously at home in France, originating in Bordeaux, but also in such famous wines like Sancerre from the Loire Valley, has found its way all around the world. And perhaps more than any other grape, it's developed its own really unique identity in each country. Chilean Sauvignon is nothing like Sancerre. Marlborough is nothing like South African Sauvignon. But it does make up more than 85% of the wine that New Zealand exports, so it is big business. In the recent years, we may have been suffering from a bit of overexposure to Sauvignon Blanc, but it has some things about it that is worth looking into because they are quite different. And as it was at the heart of New Zealand's success, they have, perhaps more than anyone else, put more effort into researching the science behind what makes it different. It's revealed a lot about the connection between where it's grown, how the wine's made, and even how it's picked, and how all of those different things change the flavour. In fact, there is no other grape variety in the world that we understand so much about. One geeky word you may hear bandied about is thiols. This is a group of flavours that are virtually only found in Sauvignon Blanc wines. They give it a characteristic grapefruit and passion fruit flavour, which turns out really nice. However, a third one of these thiols gives it the scent of catwee, which is less so. Another group of chemicals gives it green flavours of grass or green peppers, and it's that combination which really defines Sauvignon Blanc. Now, most makers of high quality wine will love to tell you how they carefully and slowly harvest their grapes by hand. Sauvignon makers will not. This is because research has shown that harvesting by machine, which is a lot less gentle, greatly enhances these grapefruit and passion fruit flavours. Now, this is also a wine that's particularly important to keep cool. Heat is the enemy of these delicate flavours. However, since the scientists worked out the secret to making good Sauvignon, it just started to become rather monotonous. Most of the Sauvignon we drink here in the UK is now imported in huge bags filling shipping containers. It's then rebottled in Europe and gets a variety of different brands stuck on the label. And for this, you pay the whacking rate of £1.70 a bottle. Add in VAT, duty, the bottle, label, transport, profit for a shop, and that's how you get your £6 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. Now, that stuff is incredible value, but you know what that tastes like, and we wanted to introduce you to something different. This is no mega international conglomerate. This winery has been family owned for nearly 30 years and takes great pride in keeping things small. It keeps all the small parcels of land separate and ferments them individually. They also are deeply rooted in their area, which is home to a rare breed of falcon. The family are one of the biggest supporters of the Marlborough Falcon Conservation Trust. But first, their winemaker Chloe would like to sing a Maori welcome to you. Creative sort of night this, isn't it?
Eko, eko, korimako, eko, kori kori ki te rangi, ori ori ki te whenua, toku reo kori kori eko konei. Kia ora koutou katoa. Lake Chalice Wines is 100% Marlborough owned and operated and has been for 30 years now. Lake Chalice got its name from a lake situated in the Mount Richmond Forest Park. This also is the habitat of New Zealand's only native falcon called the kāriaria. Marlborough is such a diverse place, not just for winemaking but also for food. For our Marlborough Sounds, we're located at the top of the South Island of New Zealand. Beautiful summer sunshine, cool winters, but again beautiful winters too. The best way to describe vine age is almost like people. So when you're older, you understand yourself a lot better. You know, when you get into your 30s, you know more about yourself, what you like, what you don't like. When we're dealing with vines that are 30 years old, for winemakers, we are getting fruit that is settled and more robust in terms of flavours and aromas. And then for our consumers who want to buy the wine, they are experiencing complex flavours that are truly representative of the place where they come from. So we have the Talon Vineyard in the Dillons Point sub-region of Marlborough, which is the most expressive region for Sauvignon Blanc. And then on the other side we have our Erie Vineyard, located in the Waihopai Valley, and that is rich in clay soil, also covering a little bit of gravel. The nest is the fun part of Lake Chalice. This is the classic Marlborough drinking experience, delivered at an affordable price. Winemaking for me in Marlborough with Lake Chalice means cool climate environment, really close to the sea, diverse soils, but an innovative winemaking team collectively in Marlborough. We have been making wines in New Zealand for 30 years now, but it's time for us to broaden our wings and explore the international scene. And so our wine is a taonga, a gift from the land, from our place to yours.
I hope you got a feeling of his hobbity nonsense, and we did have a little bit of hobbity nonsense in that video, so my apologies for that.
And we also went into some quite cool topics as well, because Sauvignon is something where the science had a huge impact on the actual flavour of the wine, and that's part of the reason why, like you say, Marlborough Sauvignon is so unique. They did all of this research and they've worked out how to maximise these thiols, these two grapefruit and passion fruit flavours that come through with that grassiness and the gooseberry flavours that you get in that, and minimise the catwee, because you don't want too much.
You don't want to just a hint. But what I like about New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is it couldn't be from anywhere else in the world. If you're sat doing a blind tasting and you're getting scored on it and need to pass an exam, Marlborough Sauvignon is just what you want, because it's the epitome of what a grape should be. You know, you open it up and you can smell the gooseberry and the citrus from the other side of the room, and it's absolutely beautiful. And
if you compare it to those £6 ones that you get in the supermarket, which are still delicious and really fresh, and there's nothing wrong with them, New Zealand have been trying to establish themselves as a bit like the BMW of the wine world.
No indicators.
No indicators. No,
there's lots of indicators in here.
Lots of indicators on this one, but no, what they wanted to be was that premium everyday, the ones which brings in that feeling of the quality, and they're positioning themselves. And it was a tough few years for them when effectively they'd solved this equation of how to make a really good Sauvignon, but then it was who can do that for the cheapest, and that's only going to end badly. So
for everybody,
yeah. And believe it or not, that £1.70 or whatever it was for the per litre of wine or per bottle of wine, that's actually a lot higher. Spain, on the bulk wine market, it's about 45 dollar cents for a litre of wine, and so it still is premium. And but where you find something like this, and how would you describe the differences between this and your supermarket one?
I just think there's more intensity about it. You know, you've got this, and I think it's the same with a lot of the entry-level wines. They do a great job of you working out, I like this, I like that, I like that, but they become a bit one-dimensional. It's like, it's ubiquitous, this is what you get. Whereas when you take that little step up, there's more things that you can think of. It's not just grapefruit and just this and just that. You can talk about the acidity and the minerality and those kind of things that come with it. Yes, New Zealand Sauvignon is a great marker for what wines you eat. But when you taste 4 or 5 side by side, you can see those little differences that make each vineyard separate and each winery separate and each winemaker a little bit different. And, you know, I think Lake Chalice do a phenomenal job. They make multiple wines, they make multiple Sauvignons, they make some Pinot Noir and some really good stuff.
And until you get into the next level, which was where they start bringing things like oak to ferment in barrels and use native yeast, which introduces a whole world of random things that could possibly happen. And those are really funky and really cool. We'll be exploring one of those on our Adventurers series on the masterclass next, week or two away. But
exactly, but we're getting a little way in. Yeah, we've got a sea shanty. He's slightly obsessed. My apologies for him. But what we're going to do next is we're going to put wines 2 and 3 in the glass side by side. Not on top of each other, or otherwise you get a blend, but side by side is fantastic. And we're doing a little bit of a move here into some aromatic varietals. Is that your 2 and 3 together?
It is.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put them in the glass. I'm going to tell you a little bit about wine tasting. We're then going to do the wine news, and then we're going to do a little video. So we're going to do a bit of tasting first, and then the video is with the winemakers, one from myself and one from Mr. Chris Rackham, and that's more about what the wineries are about and who they are. So we're going to do a little bit of tasting first, and just some things to look for, because these are 2 grapes that I absolutely love, but some things that sometimes people get wine terminology a little bit confused. So in wine number 2, we have a Viognier from Hawke's Bay, which is up on the North Island. And then we come back down to Marlborough and we've got the Doctor's Riesling from the tip of the South Island. So we do the Viognier, lots of aromatics, lots of fruit in there, lots of, you know, apples, pears, tropical fruits, you know, and it's just really like bang on the nose. You get a lot going in there.
And you get that floral aspect that really comes across as well, don't you?
Without a question of a doubt.
Well, it's like honeysuckle.
Honeysuckle, those things. And what you may think with this is where when you're tasting wine, try not to get confused between these 2 words, fruity and sweet.
Because I would instinctively say, this is a sweet wine.
It's got some sweet flavours about it, because we think about these wines and we think about honey, we think about these rich ripe fruits, and we think, oh, that's a sweet thing when I have it in real life. But when we talk about sweetness in wine, it's about how much sugar is actually in the grape. Well, in the grape, there's lots in the grape, but when it's been made, Mr. Winemaker, after it's fermented in the final wine, and this has very little sugar in it. So therefore, this is an absolutely bone dry wine.
This is a Darren Brown illusion in a glass, this one.
You've been working on that, haven't you?
Only for 2 seconds.
If we then have a look at wine number 3, this is our Riesling, and this is sweet. Well, it's off dry. It's not sweet like a dessert wine, but it sits with about 37 grams of residual sugar per litre. So that means in each litre of wine, there's 37 grams of sugar left over. So
you're probably wondering why I was sticking my tongue in the glass. And
because you drink like a lizard?
Apparently so, yeah, or a frog or something. But yes.
So as he's showing you this, you can a trick to tell whether wine is sweet or not sweet is on your palate, you taste sweetness at the very tip of your tongue. So if you just roll the glass back and literally put your tongue into the wine, don't swallow anything, don't taste anything, but if it's sweet, you will feel sweetness on your palate. If there's no sweetness, it will just feel cold and wet. And this is my amazing way to make 300 people stick their tongue into a glass and go, But you can see that's got sweetness, and if you go back to the Viognier, there's not. So continue to sip through these while we do a little bit of the wine news, and then we're going to go to a video that explains a little bit more about the history, the regions, and what's going on. So the first interview you'll see is me with Hamish Clark, who's the winemaker. I spoke to him right before we launched. So if you see this video, this was done about 6 months ago, and you see I had much shorter hair, less grey. I was a different person back then.
Fewer injuries.
Exactly. No wine-making injuries. And then the second interview is with Chris Rackham, our superstar wine buyer, with Beth Forrest. But with the wine news, first of all, I think we should go to Easter Island. We can do that first.
Absolutely. Which is technically part of Chile, or Chile, as they'd probably say it. But and we are doing a Chilean tasting in a couple of months' time now, aren't we?
We are indeed.
But, before that, oh yes, there we go. There's an actual picture of it. So it turns out that the French explorers, when they came over to the island, it's very windy, Easter Island. So what they did was they went down into the crater of the volcano, where it was much more sheltered, and they planted all sorts of fruits, mangoes, bananas, and of course, being French, they put some grapes in just to see whether it would work. And these vines were rediscovered, and they were thriving. They're still doing brilliantly. So they've taken a punt. And they planted 2 hectares of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir just to see what can come out of Easter Island. I think if you're looking for a unique terroir, that's a pretty cool place, isn't it?
I don't think there's anywhere else I've seen wine grown in a crater. So that's very, very interesting. So what else is going on? So we've got Easter Island. However, I feel a bit dodgy because we had some tech issues, but we are really, really excited, and we have to thank everybody who's been a part of this from day one. And if I witter on and you need to get drinking your wine, tell me to shut up very, very quickly. But we were nominated by the Drinks Retail Awards for the Drinks Retail Awards for Best Independent Retail Promotion, and somehow we won it. Our little wine club managed to win in our first year the best independent promotion for the online wine tasting club. So we are really excited, really happy. We got the award last week, and thank you everyone who has ever bought a tasting, told a friend to buy a tasting, put a comment on Facebook, bought a bottle of wine from us, and whatever you've done. But I know it's not an Oscar ceremony, but I've just got to go down a quick list because you generally see me and Alex on the screen, but there are a lot of other people here. So I just need to give a shout out to Caroline, who's our all-around superstar marketing, super producer, sorts everything we need to sort out. We've got Chris, who does some of our buying, helps us sort out the interviews, all that kind of stuff. We've got Sharon, who has put in the last month, you have no idea how many of these little bags into little boxes, into bigger boxes, into the post, and without her you would not have a wine tasting. So I think that is key to everything. We've got Molly, who is doing lots of pretty pictures and social media, so you know what's going on with us. Emily, I think she's on our tasting tonight. She helped us with the PR at the very, very beginning to make sure people knew we existed. Every winery that has given us the time of day to talk to their winemakers and their people to create this great content for you.
He's going to start crying in a moment.
I'm not.
You know.
All of our suppliers who have made sure we've got these great wines so we can get them out to you. Our families and friends who have supported us through this, with a special mention to Alex's wife Naomi and my wife Heidi, because they have put up with us being here till whatever time of
Sleeping
whatever
in the
day,
winery.
doing this to bring great content to everyone and believing in what we're doing, and that's absolutely amazing. Everyone locally in Tring who supported the Winery and Online Wine Tasting Club from the beginning, and you know, each and every
Come on, get on with it.
this guy, because if he'd not believed that I could do something here, we wouldn't have it at all. So that's it. Thank you very much. And Alex is thinking about making some wine this year, but if you want to make wine at home, there should be a photo, and it's the best way to...
This was another Facebook advert.
This is a Facebook ad.
And it's basically implying that anyone can be a winemaker, which sounds like something out of Ratatouille, that Disney film, which is brilliant. Anyone can be a winemaker. And a good winemaker can come from any background, no matter how humble. But I suggest it isn't by taking a carton of grape juice and pouring in some yeast. That is a way to get prison hooch, which will be, well, it'll be alcoholic.
Our 2020 vintage?
Will,
maybe not. But on that note, let's get to the next video and keep drinking. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Wine number 2 is from another family-run wine estate, St Clair. Neil and Judy Ibbotson have been growing grapes for other wineries since 1978, before they took the leap into making their own wines in 1994. Their vineyards are split between Hawke's Bay and Marlborough, where they make, yes, Sauvignon Blanc, but tonight we're looking at a much rarer grape, in New Zealand at least, Viognier. We had a chance to speak to winemaker Hamish Clark about this. After that, we go on and talk to Beth Forrest from Forest Wines in Marlborough about the Doctor's Riesling, to find out who these mysterious doctors actually are.
We are lucky enough this evening to talk with Hamish Clark over at St Clair Winery in New Zealand. So really, I think the question that everyone wants to know, it's a bit of a mad industry. What got you into wine?
It is a mad industry. I grew up in Marlborough, and so I've been surrounded by the sort of very start of what was an unforeseen explosion into the valley. So when I was growing up as a kid, there was places that were being developed. There was land that was being sold off for very, very small amounts of money compared to what they're worth these days, simply because the land wasn't that fertile. They were only able to graze half a dozen sheep per acre type thing. So as farming land, it wasn't really worth that much, and all of a sudden the wine industry has tipped that on its head totally. So the whole valley now is planted one edge to the other pretty much. There's still little pockets here and there of land that's not planted in vineyard, but by and large it's pretty homogenous across the valley. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go to university, didn't really know what I wanted to do at university, so I actually took a couple of years off. I worked a couple of vintages with Daniel Lebrun back in the day. He was Cellar Lebrun method producer. Daniel comes from Epinay. He came out here. He immediately recognised the potential here, and so he shifted his young family out and set up a business. So a couple of vintages with Daniel. I really enjoyed the work, but I just sort of found there was a edgy pretentiousness that didn't quite it didn't quite suit me or what I was going to do. So the other career avenue I thought might be worth a look at is aquaculture. There's a lot of aquaculture here in the Sounds, both salmon, king salmon, and green lip mussel, making a lot of money, or that as an export industry was making a lot of money. So I went to university, studied microbiology, zoology, and was planning on doing the postgrad diploma in marine biology. I took a job working at a place called Marlborough Valley Cellars, and I failed to ask on the first day. I'd never heard of Marlborough Valley Cellars. The whole valley was a different place to when I left to go to university. I'd been away out of Marlborough for about 8.5 years, albeit that I'd had fleeting visits back home for Christmas, etc. But there was a real electricity in the air. There was something, it just felt like something was happening. And so really I just took the job working vintage Marlborough Valley Cellars, working in their laboratory, just analysing the juices, etc. And it started ticking the boxes. And by the time we got to the end of vintage, it was just, I knew that there was something in here that was giving me the job satisfaction that I was looking for. There was hands-on, get dirty, use my head for technical stuff. And I was only just a lab rat back then. I basically made myself indispensable back at Marlborough Valley Cellars. So anytime anyone was sick, I'd go and learn their job. I was lucky enough to be able to pick things up pretty quickly, and got to about halfway through the year, got through to sort of August, and got offered a contract to stay on till the next vintage.
So do you have any, like what we would call formal winemaking qualifications, or has it all been on the job with the right people taking you under their wing to get you where you are now?
Yeah, that very much the latter. I did ask the group, both Simon, Kim, Matt, etc. I was prepared to go studying at Roseworthy. That was my university of choice to go and further my understanding. All three of them said, "Hey, you've got the technical understanding. You know how to read your textbooks. You understand what they're describing. Invest in your own time. Invest in textbooks, and ask plenty of questions." So no, I don't have any formal V&O qualifications, but yeah.
Fantastic.
And you know, it's winemaking is very much, there's the technical side of it, which anybody can study and learn, but it's really the apprenticeship of the palate. That's the biggest part of whether you're a capable winemaker or not.
Little bit of help with geography, because you've got vineyards in Marlborough, and then you've got vineyards up in Hawke's Bay, which is obviously on two different islands, and vastly different, and making obviously vastly different styles of wine. What are the key points, in a nutshell? And saying in a nutshell is very, very, brings it right down. There's lots of different things, but if we just had to sum up the differences between what happens in Hawke's Bay and what happens in Marlborough, and what makes that good for specific varietals or specific styles of wine.
Yeah, sure. Yes, it's been reasonably recent. We started taking a little bit of fruit from a couple of contract growers up in Hawke's Bay in about 2009, 2010. Things got a little bit more serious. 2012, 11 and 12, tough vintages for our contract grower up there. So end of the 2012 vintage, he offered the vineyard to St. Clair, offered first right of refusal. The contract grower was getting out of the game. He wanted to focus on his strawberry production. And Neil looked at the opportunity. He asked us as sort of the winemaking group if we thought the potential was there, and we took ownership of the vineyard. Ironically, the 2013 vintage, the first year of our ownership, was probably the vintage of the decade, if not longer. So we really fell on our feet on that one. So the reason we're interested in the Hawke's Bay area is that it is a warmer growing climate. It's capable of producing the Merlot, the Cabernet, the Malbec, the Syrah that we have in our portfolio. It's extend our portfolio varietals, basically.
You've got a fair few different grapes that you grow and produce under the St. Clair label. How are we starting to see those develop for you, kind of commercially, as both domestically for you and also onto the international market? Are we starting to see some good growth? Are people excited by them, or is it still kind of a little bit difficult to get people to get into something that's not maybe what they would expect?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We, in terms of our varietal makeup, next to Sauvignon Blanc, which accounts for close to 70% of our entire production. Putting that in perspective, there's other companies around the valley that it's almost entirely their production, but 70% is Sauvignon. The rest of it is sort of broken down into Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, a bit of Viognier, a bit of Grüner Veltliner. We've got Pinot Blanc and a very small parcel of Albarino now in the portfolio, very first time this year. So we've got a very diverse array of mostly aromatic varieties. If you take out sort of the Chardonnay, the rest of them are reasonably aromatic. Yeah. Where
can people go in New Zealand that is outside of their comfort zone of their Pinot Noir from Otago or their Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, that's not going to take them a million miles away and go, holy moly, what am I drinking? But are there any little cool little pockets or cool varietals that are being made that aren't going to be a million miles away from what they like, but they can then tell their friends, oh, look what I'm drinking now, and it's a little bit different? Any advice for
sure.
that?
Yeah, no, I know you guys have our Viognier over there, and Viognier again is a variety that a lot of people think is overly alcoholic, and often it is overly alcoholic at sort of 13, 14, 15% in some cases. The Viognier that we're getting out of the Hawke's Bay just has this incredible fruit intensity. It's everything you're after in a Viognier. It's got a nice acidity. It's not cloying, and it's for those that have tried Viognier, kind of like it but kind of don't. Because of the overbearing heat of the alcohol, etc. This is one that might pull them back into the enjoyment category there.
Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as soon as we've got this up and running, I'll get you an email over so you can see what we're doing. And
great,
would love to, as we build this, do some more wines and chat with you further at some point if you'd like to do that.
Sure, very welcome. Yeah, I'd love to.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Cheers. Yeah. Well, Dave, it's evening for me. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
We planted in 1988 in Marlborough. So I guess to give you a bit of background, my parents started our company, John and Bridget Forrest. Mum is a GP, was a GP obstetrician, so an actual medical doctor, and she then has travelled through her own time range as she's got older. So she retrained in geriatrics when she was in her 50s, and then now in her 60s, she's retrained in palliative care. So she works with the hospice centres and other things here in Marlborough and Nelson, and as part of the DHB health board. So she's our community carer. And then Dad was also studied medicine at Otago University here in New Zealand, and then they travelled out to America. Dad got into biomedical research. So they worked based in San Diego at the Silk Institute, and then eventually decided to get back to this side of the globe, so moved back to Adelaide, South Australia, and then eventually the call, I guess, to home to New Zealand was too strong, and so they moved back to New Zealand, landed at a place called Palmerston North, which is sort of the arse end of New Zealand, if anybody out there knows New Zealand very well. But it's the sort of centre of science in New Zealand, but big farming communities. And then after it was only about 6 to 9 months, Mum told Dad that it was perhaps time for him to find something else to do with his life, because otherwise she might move him on. I think one of the best descriptions ever given of him, if you read one of his old work reports, was that he was far too artistic to ever make a great scientist. And that he's an ideas man. We call my dad the mad scientist. He has about 20 or 30 ideas a day, and it's sort of our job to try and sift through the good ones. But he's, I don't know, I've never met a 65-year-old with as much energy as he has, and as many ideas and as many things going on as they do. Yeah, I think we often describe the wine industry as the perfect balance of art and science. And I think, that definitely is true of, I guess, the birth of forest wines. It was a place to express yourself and still go through the scientific side of it. All the research we've done over the years still comes back to that scientific base, I suppose. So Dad was originally from Marlborough, had grown up here, and we had a family farm just outside of the Picton region in Coromiko over the last sort of 6 generations. And so it was very much a calling home. They came home for my grandmother's birthday with all of us 3 children in tow, and there was a block of land for sale, an old apple orchard. So I think at that point they were ready to change what they were doing with life, so bought this apple orchard and we moved back to Marlborough. And that was 1986, 87. And then in 88, the end of the 80s, the arse started falling out of the apple industry in New Zealand. So the Chinese cancelled some contracts to New Zealand and other things. And so at that point, they thought, well, Dad decided he'd give it a whirl, and we pulled 1 block of apples out and planted some grapes. And at that time, I guess, Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc hadn't taken off the way it has now around the globe. So it was a vineyard that had Muller-Thurgau, Muscadet, Chenin Blanc, Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, a whole lot of different varietals, I guess, that Dad had seen around the world as they'd been travelling in the younger years. And especially, I think that he always says that they discovered wine in America, in Napa in California, fell in love with it in South Australia, where they were sort of based out in the farming regions, and then, really sort of made it their own back in New Zealand.
How early on did the doctor's concept come on? Obviously, it's you said before about the low alcohol and low calorie element to it, whether you see that as being a sort of key aspect for you guys in your company.
So the Doctors was born almost 15 years ago now. In its first instance was a celebration, I guess, of everything that Mum and Dad had achieved. And about when I guess I put my hand up at about the age of 20 and said that I was actually going to go and do winemaking, and Dad got a little bit excited, I think, about the possibilities of, having another generation of forest wines. But Dad has always had a mad passion for Riesling. So we have always made about 6 different types of Riesling, from bone dry, Clear Valley Australian style, right through to Trockenbeer and Auslese, beautiful sort of German late harvest Botrytis styles.
Well, listen, that's been just fantastic. Thanks
worries.
for all that information. It's absolutely amazing. I'm not sure we're able to cut this down to 5 minutes. Might have to give you an extended showing on the evening itself.
Well, I hope everyone enjoys it. But yeah, I hope it sounds like you've got a good lineup of wines for the evening. So
you too.
Cheers.
Take care.
Yeah.
All the best. Bye-bye.
So I hope that gave you a little bit of insight as to these two very, very different wines, and some really good stuff in the chat. And yeah, the Riesling definitely brought up a few things. Some people thought it was a little bit sweet. Some people talked about, there's some good dry options. And this is why I think Riesling is a great, because it goes from absolutely bone dry to absolutely sticky sweet dessert wine and everywhere in the middle. But what's really interesting about this wine in particular is the fact that they've kept it as a lower alcohol wine, because it sits at 9%, so you can drink it by the gallon. Can we say it? We can't say that, can we?
Probably not.
No, we can't say that. You could choose to drink it however much you think would be
in a responsible fashion.
responsible way. Absolutely.
Watching your sugar intake, of course, so as to avoid diabetes.
There we are. Health and safety here.
Sugar is a relative thing, or sweetness is a relative term, because if you taste that next to your chocolate cake, which has a lot more sugar in it than that does, it will suddenly seem the bonus dry thing on the planet. And if you have it with something like Asian foods, with a bit of spice to it, you will be loving the fact that it's low alcohol, because the low alcohol doesn't burn as much when you've got the chili in your mouth.
And I think what's important to look at is, apart from, professional drinkers in the world, it's not always we have 5 wines back to back just kind of by themselves. And what you've got to think about, and what's important, is that when you would use it in the real world, with take wine number 1, I think that's just a nice easy drink it by the glass. Wine number 2, I think, would be great with a cheese board. Drinkable by itself, absolutely, but a cheese board, something like a bit of cheddar with that kind of like salinity to it. And then wine number 3, with that little bit of sweetness, you probably want some food that's a little bit spicy or something like that to go with it. And it's all about balance in the world. Balance in the world.
I think we should crack on with wines 4 and 5. But before we do that, obviously do keep any questions coming in the chat, and we'll try to get to them at the end. Jamie, have you got any questions for them?
I may well do. So, for those who are new to us, I generally try and ask a slightly ridiculous question. Caroline's popped it up on the screen so you can see it already. But...
Oh, no, she hasn't yet.
Is it not? Oh,
it's got to push the blue button.
Oh, I saw it. Oh, she's prepped to go up. I can just see a different screen here. However, we talked about New Zealand, and when we talk about New Zealand, what do we got? We got kiwis, those little birds, not the fruits. We've got great wine.
Well, the fruit's not from the birds, so they not just take the beak off?
Like eggs.
Oh, eggs.
Kiwis lay kiwis.
I see.
But this is why I do a wine show, not a
food
we're
show.
not David Attenborough, because that's probably wrong. But anyway, used to, huge lamb export market.
Yes, they have a few sheep.
There's a couple of sheep, and back in 1982 there was 22 sheep per person. Now there's only about 6.1. It's kind of it's balanced. But anyway, the question today is, if we take the value of the wine exported to the UK from New Zealand in 2019, and the winemakers of New Zealand thought they'd be lovely, lovely people and they didn't need any money anymore, and they split all that money equally between every sheep in New Zealand, how much would each sheep get? Would it be £1, £10, £100, £1,000, £10,000, £100,000, £1,000,000? How many would you get? So it's coming up. There's going to be a thing on there, and we will have a little look at the answers once we've done the reds. But before we go to the reds, we should probably talk about how we got to these reds, because it wouldn't be a wine tasting without a challenge from our fair producer Caroline over there, who's giggling at us because I'm building this up, and it's getting very excited just about 2 glasses of wine here.
Indeed.
But what? New Zealand, once again, very, very famous for its white wines. Yeah, we talk about Sauvignon Blanc, these aromatic varietals, and there are some really, really good red wines out there. There really are, but they don't always see the light of day. So if you're new into New Zealand wine, this might be a bit of a, ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So what the challenge was to pick a grape that you may well have heard of, but might well associate from somewhere else in the world. So Alex picked something, whatever he picks his usual stuff.
Right one.
And I picked something really kind of fun and interesting. No, both wines are absolutely fantastic. Opposite end of the spectrum, and for the sheer fact when we had the poll at the end, I put an option for tied in for this one because I thought it was important. But we've got a Pinot Noir as wine number 4. We've got a Syrah as wine number 5. We're going to give you a little bit of a tour of where they're from, and then we're going to come back to the studio.
Indeed, and before we just go off, it's also worth saying, because we might have slightly glossed over this, and I've realised, having watched the video, I've slightly glossed over it, which is that it's a back to front country to where we are. So when you think of going up to the north, you aren't getting cooler, you are getting hotter. So you're getting cooler the further down you go in New Zealand, because of course you're getting close to the South Pole.
Further from the equator.
Further from the
Opposite.
equator.
I did that.
Indeed. So we've got
GCSE
one,
for you.
the Otago one's right down the south, and that is cooler, and the Syrah, as you might expect, is from a warm
Further north.
place.
They're on different islands.
Yeah.
But anyway, we should get to the video so we can keep drinking.
So
Enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy.
For our red wine challenge, I'm doing what any sensible wine lover would, going to Otago, which is the world's most southerly wine region. And of course, I'm picking a Pinot Noir. Here, Pinot Noir receives the gentle heat during the day that allows it to ripen properly, but the cooler weather at night that brings the best out of this fragile, thin-skinned grape. In fact, Otago has the widest extremes of temperature of anywhere in New Zealand. Rockburn, taking its name from the nearby rock-strewn and burn-scarred landscape, are one of the pioneers of Otago, with vineyards overlooking Lake Dunstan on the 45th parallel. That's 45 degrees south of the equator. Now, if you go around 45 degrees north of the equator, you'll find France and Burgundy. And it turns out they know a thing or two about making Pinot Noir. Rockburn's 2017 vintage of this wine won the Champion Wine of the Show award at the New Zealand International Wine Show. They're a producer who love to keep things simple and let the land express itself. And I really love Pinot, so this is my choice.
Well, Pinot's a good and safe choice. Classic Taylor. But go a little further north and New Zealand can generate some real heat, and Syrah loves heat. I'm here in Hawke's Bay with Trinity Hill. The idea for this wine came around in London in 1987 over a glass of Chardonnay at the Bleeding Heart restaurant between the restaurant's owners Robin and Robert Wilson and winemaker John Hancock. Wine critic Robert Parker has said Trinity Hill is one of Hawke's Bay's outstanding producers, and who am I to disagree with that? Here in Hawke's Bay we find New Zealand's best place for Bordeaux-style wines. Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot thrive here. Chardonnay was one of the first grapes planted, but now we're also seeing Syrah as well as other grapes such as Tempranillo and Viognier. And these guys were some of the very first to plant these new varieties in the region. The microclimate and unique deep gravel soils left by the river as it's changed course over thousands of years lead to small crops with intense and highly concentrated flavours and aromas. The Syrah we're tasting right now is from the Trinity Hills Hawke's Bay range. The wine is full of deep berry fruit, licorice and spice. And I can let you into a little secret. There's also a touch of Viognier in there, which gives a wonderful perfume characteristic. And if you love this wine, keep an eye out for their Homage Syrah, which has won countless awards. Trinity Hill is a world-class winery and makes some incredible wines, but they also have a lighter side. And here are some of the behind-the-scenes action from one of their vintages. Call me old-fashioned, but I like a little bit of playfulness in my wine. So, Otago Pinot or Hawke's Bay Syrah? Let us know what you think as we go back to the studio. So I think that was maybe the shortest video Alex has ever managed to put together. It wasn't a 3-part Lord of the Rings saga, which I might have been expecting from a New Zealand tasting.
It's true. It's true. I think it's really important to say it's pretty much all wineries make one of these behind the scenes videos of what goes on during vintage, because vintage, the process of making the wine, is ludicrously stressful. It's even more stressful, some say, than trying to put together a wine tasting. But there are some hilarious videos of things that go on during. People come in. You've got temporary workers. They drink a lot of beer and they work pretty much 24/7 for about a month, and then it's all over and it's all quiet again. And Chris Rackham, he's done a vintage out in New Zealand himself, and so he's been giving us some of those stories. So it sounds hilarious fun, but it's really good to see the guys just taking that. And that wine is absolutely delicious, and they've got all the credits as well from people like Parker. So
no, absolutely. That just from their entry level, they make lots of different stuff. This is from their Hawke's Bay range, but they make single vineyard gimlet gravel stuff. They make their homage de Syrah. They make lots of different things, and the same with the Rockburn. This is the Devil's Staircase, but they make lots of different Pinot Noirs at different levels. So there's a little something for everyone.
I'm pretty sure gimlet gravel sounds like one of the dwarfs from Lord of the Rings.
Back to that again. My word.
No more hobbity nonsense.
Yeah, we said no more hobbity nonsense, and he's full of hobbity nonsense. So my apologies for him. If you'd like Caroline to come back on instead of Alex, please put a note in the chat, and she will come and join us for our next tasting. Thank you very much.
That sounds good to me.
It's the will of the people. The will of the people. But what I think is important about these is you can prefer one, you can like one, you can not like the other. That's absolutely fine. But they are two very, very different wines, and once again, for two very, very different occasions. You just look at the colour. The Pinot Noir is light and fruity and soft and easy drinking. The Syrah has this kind of grip, this tannin, this spice about it. And I'll answer the red wine question first. Someone mentioned something about older wines with tertiary flavours in the chat, and those can be great. So they're a wine for and this is probably getting. If I get too geeky, tell me to be quiet in the chat, and that's absolutely fine. Hey?
What a tertiary flavour.
Exactly, that's what I'm getting. I'm getting Caroline's jumping the gun, and so when we look into a red wine, we've got three kind of types of styles of flavour. So we've got our fruity flavours that we talk about, the blackcurrant, the jam, the whatever it is. But we look at primary fruit flavours, which are when we talk about these big, rich fruit, fresh things. When we talk about blackcurrants, raspberries, strawberries, those kind of things. We then have our secondary flavours, which come from winemaking things. So when you taste vanilla or spice and things like that come from maybe some oak aging or something like that. And then we have our tertiary flavours, which are our developmental characteristics. So when a wine gets a little bit older, when we talk about things like tobacco or leather or chocolate. And some younger wines have these, but they become more pronounced as they get older. So if you like a wine that has more of these grippy flavours, these earthy flavours, these leathery, tobacco-y flavours, you want to look at a wine that's a little bit older, potentially. Yeah. But a lot of these wines now are designed to be drunk young and fresh and bright and fruity, especially if you're just having it by the glass. Sometimes if I'm having something by the glass, I don't want to have this chewiness, this dryiness of my mouth. And it doesn't mean the wine is good or bad or indifferent. It's what you like. And there's a lot of people go, oh, will this wine improve with age? That's not a yes-no question. It depends what you like. If you want a really big, jammy, fruity wine, will your Pinot Noir improve with age if you want it fruity and jammy? No, it won't. But if you like something that's got a little bit more earth, a little bit more spice about it, over 3, 4, 5 years, you might find those characteristics more pleasing to your palate. So it's not about what's right or wrong or indifferent. It's about how you enjoy drinking your wine, and that's what's hugely important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there's, we've talked a bit more about the different schemes to evaluate wines, and it's quite important. People look for balance, and are the different components in line with each other? With surfing, and let's stop doing that. Then you look for length. How long does the flavour last in your mouth? Oh my God. You look for intensity of those flavours, and you look for complexity. And it's very easy to tie complexity with those characteristics that develop with time in bottle or in barrel. What I'm seeing with complexity with this, if you compare this to let's say a Chilean Tesco value Chilean Merlot, still a perfectly good wine, does exactly what it needs to do, but there'll be a very uniform sort of red fruit flavour to it. A little bit of
Standardised.
cherry, a little bit of strawberry. What I'm getting in this, and feel free to disagree or agree with me as you please, I instantly know
Disagree with them. It's much more fun.
on the palate there's a little bit of the spice and vanilla from the oak, the winemaking techniques, but also you might start to see a broader range of different fruits, and particularly I'm seeing this sort of banana-y bubblegum-like flavour coming into it, which I don't know, Caroline's nodding.
So there's been a lot of comments about fromage frais.
Fromage frais, yep.
Dairy in the comments,
Okay.
which I think pairs well with that bubblegum.
Yeah, exactly, and
You're saying the comments are a bit cheesy.
yeah.
Boom!
But no,
I
there's
should
lots
leave,
of
shouldn't
different
I?
things going on in here, and you can tell that. So how do you evaluate that this is more than that? If you've got those sort of bubblegum, kirsch, banana flavours coming into it, that's a sign that what they've done is taken at least part of the grapes and tried to do them in a...
He's going to adventurous level.
I know.
He's going.
They've made it in a different winemaking technique, which involves whole bunches or whole grapes, and that's quite cool because you've only done that to create more complexity. So just look at that complexity, look at how many different things you can pick out, and take a bit of time over it. Take the wine in your mouth and just make sure you get a little bit of air over it so it goes in, and just evaluate and see how many different kind of things you can say. And if it's very simple, that will be over very quickly.
Absolutely, and it's we go back to it. It's the right wine for the right time.
Yeah.
But what I think these two wines show is they're chalk and cheese. They're so vastly different. They're from vastly different places, and
It's like Burgundy versus Rhone.
But what and that's what's exciting about New Zealand. We go from all the way north, 32.5 degrees down to 46 degrees south. It's a massive. It's across the entire, latitude that you can grow wine. You've got from New Zealand, and you go all the way up into north into Auckland and Waiheke Island, and you've got these
Hobbiton.
whatever he said.
I'm just poking him now.
But you get these amazing Cabernets, Cab Francs, things like that. We've got amazing aromatics in Hawke's Bay and those Bordeaux and Rhone varietals there. We go to Marlborough, amazing Sauvignon Blanc. You go a little bit over to Nelson, they're making Grüner Veltliner and Riesling like it's the best thing in the world. And then you come all the way south, you're in Otago. And I know I've missed a lot of the great regions out there. So if there's anyone watching who's a big New Zealand fan and I've missed your Canterbury's and places like that, please feel free to yell at
Gisborne.
me. But it's very, very hard to do an entire country in
5 wines.
in 5 wines. But I hope we've given a little bit of an overview. But yeah, this Syrah, I absolutely
That
love.
is
It's
excellent.
big, it's spicy, it kicks you in the face. But am I going to drink 3 glasses? Well, I am, because that's how I am. But generally, this is going to be more of you want to have a bite to eat with it, bit of food, bit of barbecue.
We tried this when we were trying to work out what order to put all the wines in and make sure that they were all good enough. And I have to say, I wasn't convinced, but I am absolutely convinced by that now. And so that's an impact of how the different time, the place, what you've been eating or drinking can totally change your perception. But that's a really good wine.
So
Well done.
Well
That was
done.
quite patronising, wasn't it?
That was well done. You picked a good wine. Slow clap for
clap,
Jamie. Thanks. Anyway, there's a question about the whites earlier that I'm just going to dive back into, and it's about comparison.
Yeah.
Because we did 2 very dry wines, and then we did a relatively sweet wine, and how that changes your perception of the wines. Because I think if you tasted the Viognier first, and you got these big floral flavours, then you went to the Riesling, and then you went back to the Viognier. The Viognier would have probably felt a little deadened in comparison because you lose, with that sugar, you get that coating on your palate, and therefore it's more difficult to pick up the high acid and the aromas. So I think that's really, really important, and a really, really good point, whoever popped it in there, that it's the same as doing a food and wine pairing. You're just doing a Riesling with something less dry. So yeah, it would have seemed sweeter than it was compared to the Viognier as you went up the line, and it is. It's a sweeter wine, 37 grams of residual sugar. But I think what's really important about this is it's got this balance, and it's got this acidity, and it's got this level of complexity with the apple and the pear. To have something that has that much sugar that just isn't sweet and sticky and cloying, it's still almost it's sweet in flavour, but it's also relatively refreshing. It's not sticky, which a lot of sweet Rieslings, especially the the things we remember from the 70s, and I say remember from you remember from the 70s. I wasn't around in the 70s. He was, but
yeah, I was born with flares.
Exactly, but it just kind of shows that it's all about. I say balance too much. If I had to do a shot every time we said balance,
I think when you started a whiteboard. But when you say 32 grams, I think it's important to remember 32 grams of sugar.
I said 37, but it's okay.
37 grams of sugar per litre. So we're not drinking a litre of it. You know, that in your glass is only really a few grams of sugar, and compared to something like drinking a Coca-Cola
or an orange juice or whatever, it's low. Coke's it's about a third of what's in Coke, which is still a chunk of sugar for wine. But there's a lot of people out there go, I don't like sweet things. I'm like, but you do.
But they're absolutely welcome to not like it and to prefer the dry wines. But I do think it's just worth having a try of those with something different, with your Asian food,
something with a little bit of spice. I think Riesling and something spice. And when July comes round and it's the summer of Riesling.
Plus, it was made by doctors, so by drinking a glass of that, you're basically saying thank you NHS, which I think is a very important message.
That might be a touch of a stretch, a little bit of a stretch there.
NHS doctors.
Well,
not anymore. They're winemakers, Caroline.
They saw the light.
Have we got anything else in the chat? Because I know we're yabbering on a little bit, but have we got any more fun
Everybody's
things?
getting on famously.
Oh, fantastic.
Having a nice chat.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
I'm glad to hear
Everybody is making friends in the chat. So I think first things first. Should we give the answer to the question?
Yeah, let's put them out their misery with this.
So there was somebody in there who thought every sheep would get £1 million. I would like to be one of those sheep.
Yeah.
It is not that. So we did a little bit of generous rounding, so we didn't have random numbers. The official number was £8.82p per sheep. So that's whoever's got £10 in there. You are a genius. Sheep to wine ratio god or goddess.
Are we gonna have one of those special glass plaques made up for them?
No. No, we're not. So that was wonderful. Well done, everyone who got that. There was a few in there, and everyone had a good guess. So it was a little bit of fun.
That says how many sheep there are. There are so many sheep.
But they only get a tenner each.
Yeah.
It's not going to stimulate the economy. It's not like a.
There's a message in there somewhere, but I'm not going to go there. But let's.
They get more being furloughed.
They would. Should we ask the people what wines they enjoyed? Because we've split it up into your favourite white wine, your favourite red wine,
your favourite overall wine, and if you've had a good time.
Yeah.
That's kind of it is. And as this poll goes up, while you click away and let us know what the wonderful world is, it's probably time to tell you what's happening next.
Indeed.
So what do we got?
I'm going to bed.
He's going to bed, so that's good. He's going to go and write some more sea shanties because we have to have one per show now. If you would like to write your own sea shanty and send it in, that would be great. No, I'm kidding. But truly, if you had a good time tonight and you've done something fun, if you've got a picture of it, of you hanging out with us, get it on social media, get it on Instagram, get it on Facebook, because we like to pick out someone who supported us, says we do nice things, and there's a £25 gift card there, which will get you another tasting for you or a friend or a bottle of wine that you like. We should probably re-reveal the prices very quickly, shouldn't we?
Yeah, that's true.
Can we do that at the same time?
What do you mean re-reveal them? We didn't show them at the beginning, did we?
Don't tell anybody.
We also should put out a huge thanks to New Zealand Wines, who have been working with us both to help put all of this together, get access to all of the winemakers, and when the wineries are all quite busy because they're shortly going to harvest season, which is a bit weird for us to all expect, but sure enough they're getting ready for harvest now, cleaning all the presses out and everything. But also we've been sending around their samples for the wines that they are just releasing this year to all of the famous journalists and wine shops in the country, and we are immensely grateful for them to putting their trust in us, and we hope that some of the reactions we had, the Sunday Times saying it was space age packaging, which is quite cool,
which made me very happy.
That was nice.
But there's a couple of things. If you have loved this, we're doing an adventurous level on the 20th where we're going to do a deeper dive. We're going to do some wild fermented native yeast things. We're going to do a two Pinot Noirs side by side to look at the difference. So that's coming up. There's still a little bit of time to get that in.
I'm going to be telling you all about mechanical harvesting, which sounds immensely dull, but I promise you it's actually kind of cool. It's like watching these Heath Robinson machines. They're brilliant.
Alex in a tractor.
Exactly.
Can't
I now get
wait.
Twitter adverts for ploughs. That's my life.
But also, if you've liked this, have a look at New Zealand Wine, nzwine.com. They're doing some masterclasses this week. I think it's on Friday, if I'm correct. There's a Hawke's Bay New Zealand masterclass that you can log into and kind of learn a little bit about what's going on. They have phenomenal content, and you get to their website. The videos are amazing. Anything that you would want to learn about New Zealand wine is either here or right there.
No,
so I pretended like we were there.
The collection that we've just put up, if the links don't quite work, we will be getting them working in the next hour or so, and we'll send out an email just so you've got links to all the wines for any particular ones you loved. But yes, they should be on the website now. We'll just get the collection set up in a bit.
Perfect. And then, for those who have been all New Zealandy, next month, don't tell anyone from New
We're
Zealand.
going miles away.
We're going to Australia. So we're doing Australia for discoverers. So anyone who's a member will join us for that. And then if you want to go a bit deeper, we're doing the Adelaide Super Zone for our our adventurous level. Going into April, we're going to do wines of Chile.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do Eastern Europe for a little bit of fun. But once again,
maybe get that Romanian wine in.
Exactly. We're getting lots of shouts. There's lots of people saying that we want to do what they want to do. We're looking at doing some winemaker series where we'll be live with the winemakers and stuff like that. But as we always say, we're growing, we're trying to get better every time, but it's your club. So let us know what you want, what we can do, what's going to make you excited, what's going to make you want to tune in and listen to this guy yabber on about wine for a little while. I know you love to hear me talk. Everyone says no in the chat. I see that.
No, yeah.
That's fine. Anyway,
Let's find out who won.
Let's find out who won, and then we can let you all get on your merry way. Because I know we're talking a lot.
Brilliant.
Okay, the favourite white wine of the evening.
Sauvignon Blanc.
The Sauvignon Blanc.
And that shows why New Zealand
That's why
does it best.
It's something like, yeah, that's brilliant. It is delicious.
With what percentage?
57%.
Wow.
57%.
30% for the Viognier and just 13% for the Riesling.
Boo! I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Exactly. Everyone's entitled to their opinion.
And then the favourite red wine was number 5, Jamie. You'll be pleased to know.
Boom! Someone needs to buy Alex a new shirt.
I think that's fair. I really liked that. That was delicious. So fair play.
And the wine of the night was?
The Sauvignon Blanc.
The Sauvignon Blanc, of course it was.
Which shows that's why.
Well, that's why they put all of that time and effort into researching it.
Researching it, and that's why it comes over here, and that's why people love it. So,
and it's the power of the falcon, the...
Yeah, you say that word again.
Oh, no, I had it mastered. Kairiaria. Is it that one? Something like that. Kairiaria.
What he said. Perfect. And did people have a good time?
Yes.
Yes.
They very much did.
23% of people enjoyed it. And was there the final poll for anyone joining us for the masterclass?
Oh, yeah.
There's a final one.
Do you know what?
I was just excited as to if anyone was joining us.
15% have already said they've signed up.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's good.
Wow, fantastic.
28% say they're going to sign up right now, and we know who you are, so we'll
Brilliant.
track
Yeah, we know who you are. We'll send you an invoice. And a few people are wined out, but that is absolutely fine. And we will see you again, or next time, or next month.
Thank you for putting up with our slight struggles at the beginning. We hope you had a wonderful time anyway. And
any final
technology.
things in the chat? Our favourite producer.
No, I think the crowd is split on the sea shanties.
They're split.
As they should be.
But anyway, I've got a little overexcited by this, but I just want to say thank you very much for everyone who's been a part of us picking this up this year. It's really, really exciting. So thank you. And on that note, it's probably time to
roll credits.
Roll credits.